So, you want to know about Tesla's robot-filled future, huh? Well, get this. The CNET video you sent, it throws us right into the middle of their latest event, and let me tell you, Elon's not holding back on the big promises.
What gets me is how Tesla's taking like all their existing tech, the batteries, the AI, the self-driving stuff, and just like throwing it at completely new problems. It's ambitious, to say the least.
No kidding. The video starts with Elon just like rolling up on stage in the cybercab, no steering wheel, no pedals, nothing. It's basically a car designed to be a taxi.
Yeah.
Without the whole, human driver part.
And that's where it gets interesting, right? Because this isn't just about replacing a taxi driver. He's saying these things will be so cheap to run, cheaper per mile than like taking the bus.
Yeah, he threw out some numbers, like 20 cents a mile to operate, and for us riders, it would only be 30 to 40 cents per mile after taxes and fees.
Mm-hmm. Which, if he can pull it off, could be a game changer. Think about it. Autonomous taxis suddenly become accessible to way more people, not just those who can afford a car or can drive. Public transportation could be totally upended.
Yeah, and don't forget the environmental impact. Imagine fewer gas-guzzling cars on the road and more shared electric transportation. We could be talking about a serious reduction in carbon emissions.
Right, but we also have to consider the other side of that coin. What kind of infrastructure do we need for a whole fleet of self-driving cars? Where are the charging stations? How do we make sure these things are maintained? There are a lot of logistical hurdles.
Okay, so maybe it's not quite as simple as hopping in a robo-taxi and saving the planet, but it's definitely food for thought. Speaking of food for thought, what about this Rovan thing? That thing is massive. How's that behemoth going to navigate city streets?
Yeah, the Rovan is something else. He didn't get into the nitty-gritty of how it would work, but he did mention using it for like high-density situations. Imagine a 20-person robo-taxi picking up a whole sports team or, your kid's soccer team.
Right. And he suggested the cost could be even lower than the cybercab, something like 5 to 10 cents per mile. Although, honestly, at that point, who's even keeping track?
I know, right? But the bigger issue is, how do you even begin to design traffic systems for something that large that can drive itself? How do you guarantee passenger safety with no human driver? It raises more questions than it answers.
Definitely. It seems like the Rovan might be a bit further down the line than the cybercab, but this is Elon we're talking about, so who knows? We might see a prototype cruising down the street sooner than we think.
Don't jinx us. But speaking of wild ideas, let's not forget about Optimus, the star of the show. This humanoid robot is supposed to do everything. Walk your dog, grab your groceries, even mix you a mean margarita. Is it just me, or does that sound a little too good to be true?
Right. It all sounds amazing, but what do we actually know about the tech behind Optimus? Did Elon drop any hints about how they're going to pull this off?
Well, he did say they're going to use a lot of the same tech from their cars, like the batteries, the motors, and even the AI. It's like they're taking everything they've learned about self-driving and, putting it into a robot butler.
Which, when you think about it, makes sense. If you want a robot that can move around your house, grab stuff, and understand what you're saying, it's going to need some serious processing power.
And that's where Tesla's experience with AI in their cars could actually give them a leg up. Instead of teaching a car to drive, they're teaching a robot to, perceive the world, make decisions, interact with its surroundings. It's a whole different ballgame.
And probably a lot more chaotic than teaching a car to stay in its lane.
Oh, absolutely. But it's all just speculation until we see a working prototype, right? We could talk about the possibilities all day, but the real test is whether they can actually deliver.
True. But even if Optimus is still a long way off, it's interesting to think about the implications. What happens when robots aren't just tools, but collaborators, maybe even companions? It's a whole new world.
It is a whole new world. And honestly, it's one that comes with a whole new set of questions. Like, what happens to our jobs when robots are driving our taxis, delivering our packages, and yes, maybe even mixing those margaritas?
The big question everyone's asking, right? Are we all headed for a life of leisure, or are we all going to be out of work? It's a little unnerving when you actually stop and think about it.
It is. And it's not just about jobs either. What about the ethical implications? What does it mean for human relationships when we start relying on robots for companionship or emotional support?
Yeah, it's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But it's a conversation we need to have now, before we're too far down the rabbit hole.
Exactly, because the future is coming, whether we're ready or not. It's one thing to talk about robots navigating roads and grabbing groceries, but the real question is, how does this affect us? And I don't mean in some far-off future. I mean how we live and work in a world where we're relying on robots more and more each day.
Right, because the big question everyone's asking is, what happens to our jobs when robots are the ones driving taxis, delivering packages, even like mixing those margaritas? I mean, are we all going to be sipping lemonade by the pool, or are we all going to be standing in line for, well, you know?
It's a valid concern. Automation has always been a factor in how the job market evolves. And yeah, these advanced robots, they're going to accelerate that change. But it's not as simple as just saying robots equal job losses.
So it's not necessarily a future where robots take all the jobs. It's more like they change what kinds of jobs are out there.
Exactly. History's shown us over and over again that when technology closes a door, it usually opens a few more, often in fields we haven't even thought of yet.
Okay, so like instead of driving a taxi, someone might be designing, I don't know, virtual reality experiences for those same robo-taxis.
Right. Or managing a fleet of delivery robots, developing new software for these humanoid robots. We might even see a surge in demand for people who can train others to adapt to these technologies, to bridge that human-robot gap.
So it's not just about robots creating new jobs, it's about making sure people are prepared for those jobs, especially the ones whose livelihoods are directly impacted by these changes.
100%. Okay. We need to be proactive about education, skills development, maybe even look at entirely new economic models. This tech has the potential to be incredibly beneficial, but we have to make sure those benefits are accessible to everyone.
Yeah, we don't want to end up in a situation where the rich get richer and everyone else is left behind, struggling to keep up.
Exactly. It's about making sure these advancements are inclusive and benefit everyone, not just a select few. But even if we solve the whole jobs dilemma, we still have to consider the ethical implications of robots being so integrated into our lives. Having a robot to do your chores might sound great at first, but
Yeah, when you really think about it, it does make you wonder, what happens to human connection? Are we all going to turn into hermits, happy to just hang out with our robot buddies?
it sounds crazy, I know, but these are questions you might have to grapple with. It challenges our whole understanding of consciousness, empathy, what it means to be human.
Okay, but even if we set aside those bigger philosophical questions for a minute, there's still the practical concerns. Like, what happens when things go wrong? Who's responsible if a robot causes harm? If your robotaxi gets into an accident, who's to blame? The manufacturer, the software developer, the dot robot?
Those are the million-dollar questions, and unfortunately, we don't have clear answers yet. As robots become more autonomous, more capable of making their own decisions, the lines of responsibility, they get blurred. We need new legal and ethical frameworks to navigate these uncharted waters.
And then there's the whole issue of privacy. I mean, if these robots have cameras and sensors everywhere watching our every move so they can like navigate our homes and interact with us, who has access to all that data? Is this just a slippery slope to constant surveillance?
It's a legitimate concern, especially with a company like Tesla. They've already had their fair share of scrutiny when it comes to data collection in their cars. We need clear, strict regulations in place to protect people's privacy and make sure these robots don't turn into, Big Brother in disguise.
It seems like every potential benefit of having robots around comes with a whole list of ethical challenges. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. That's the thing about disruptive technologies. They have the power to improve our lives in amazing ways, but they also force us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our values.
And ultimately, it's up to us as a society to figure out how we want to approach this technology, what kind of future we want to build with it.
Exactly. It's not about rejecting technology. It's about being thoughtful, being informed, making sure it aligns with our values.
So, stepping back for a moment, what does Elon Musk's vision for a robot-filled future tell us about his larger goals? It's not just about building cool cars or even robots, right? He's got something bigger in mind.
He said it himself. He's deeply concerned about the future of humanity. Climate change, the risks of AI spiraling out of control. These aren't just abstract concepts to him, they're driving forces behind his work.
So he sees technology as the answer to these existential threats.
In a way, yes. Electric vehicles to combat climate change, space exploration with SpaceX as a kind of insurance policy for humanity. These aren't just separate ventures for him. They're all part of a bigger plan to ensure our survival.
So in Elon's mind, these robots, the robotaxis, they're all pieces of this grand scheme to steer humanity towards a brighter future.
That's how I see it. You have to give him credit, love him or hate him. The guy thinks big. He's got everyone talking about the future, whether we like it or not.
That's for sure. And whether that future is something to be excited about or a little bit terrified of, oh, wow, that's the question, isn't it?
It is. And the most important thing is that we're having this conversation engaging with these complex issues. We can't just sit back and let the future happen to us.
We have to be active participants in shaping it.
Okay, before we get too far ahead of ourselves and start planning for, like, a robot uprising, it's funny, we've been talking about all the potential upsides and downsides of, like, living in a world full of robots, but it kind of makes you wonder how much of this is really, truly new, and how much of it is just, like, ripped straight from the pages of a sci-fi novel.
Well, I mean, Elon's always been a big picture guy, right? He's got that kind of, I don't know, science fiction way of thinking.
Right. And the thing is, he seems to be pretty good at taking those ideas, the ones that sound like they belong in a movie, and actually making them real. It makes you wonder how much of what we're seeing with these Tesla robots is, like, inspired by science fiction, and how much of it is really breaking new ground.
It's got to be a bit of both, don't you think? Think about it. Science fiction has always played a role in, like, inspiring inventors. It gives us a way to imagine new possibilities and then hopefully make those possibilities a reality. Oh yeah, for sure. Like Jules Verne, right. He imagined a submarine and then boom, we built submarine. Or the Jetsons with their flying cars. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but we're getting closer all the time. It's like fiction can kickstart real-world innovation.
Totally. And I think Elon Musk gets that. He understands that power that science fiction has, that way it can capture our imaginations and make us believe in what might be possible.
Oh, absolutely. Remember when he was talking about Optimus and he name-dropped Star Wars? I mean, come on, it doesn't get much more sci-fi than that. But it works. Those kinds of pop culture references, they make the technology seem more relatable, less intimidating, even cool,
Totally. And it's not just about the robots themselves, it's about the stories we tell about them, right? Science fiction gives us a framework. It helps us understand these advancements, these crazy new things, and process their potential impact.
So what you're saying is, science fiction can actually help us prepare for the future, even if we don't know exactly what that future looks like yet.
100%. It lets us run these thought experiments, explore all the ethical gray areas, ask the what-if questions. And those are questions we need to be asking now, before it's too late, before these technologies are so ingrained in our lives that we don't even think to question them anymore.
Which brings us right back to these Tesla robots. We've talked about the potential benefits, the risks, the ethical dilemmas, but at the end of the day, it really is up to us, to all of us, to decide what we want this future to look like.
Couldn't agree more. We can't just sit back and let things happen. We have to be part of the process, we have to be informed, and we have to make choices that align with our values.
Because we're not just talking about a world with robots, right? We're talking about a world where robots could be our collaborators, our companions even. It's kind of a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. And who knows, maybe someday we'll look back at these early Tesla robots, the Cybercab, Optimus, the whole shebang, and think, wow, that was just the beginning. It's an exciting time to be alive, that's for sure.
Exciting and, let's be honest, a little bit terrifying too, right? But hey, at least companies like Tesla are pushing the boundaries, forcing us to have these big conversations about technology, about society, about our place in all of it.
Exactly. We can't hide from the future, we have to help shape it. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating and, yeah, maybe a little scary, but mostly fascinating.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If you could have your own personal robot, what would you want it to do? And maybe even more importantly, what kind of world would you want that robot to be a part of? Think about it. Keep those questions in mind as you explore this crazy, ever-evolving world of tech and innovation. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.